Welcome to episode 14. We move from the dimness of anguish into one of the most radiant passages in Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 21, is a turning point, a shift from the shadowed mind of fear to the reappearance of hope, order, and meaning. It begins with light, then it tests that light against pride, denial, and national self-deception. Before we begin, a clear disclaimer. This presentation is a metaphysical and psychological inquiry that uses certain ideas associated with the Seth Speaks material by Jane Roberts as a conceptual lens. It is not a replacement for scripture, doctrine, or personal faith. The Bible is honored here as sacred text. Our purpose is educational and philosophical, to examine how prophetic experience may operate through awareness, symbolism, moral perception, and the structure of human meaning. Isaiah opens with a promise that interrupts despair. The gloom will not last. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. In theological terms, this is hope breaking into history. In human terms, it is the moment when a crushed population begins to lift its eyes again. Darkness here is not merely the absence of information. It is a state of inward collapse, fear, grief, confusion, and the sense that tomorrow holds only more loss. When Isaiah says, "great light," he is naming a reversal of that inward climate. A new perception becomes possible. A new future becomes thinkable. Psychologically, this resembles what happens when a community exits survival mode and regains meaning. When people live under constant threat, their attention narrows, they scan for danger, their imagination shrinks. But when hope returns, attention expands. People can plan again. They can create again. They can remember that life is more than emergency. Isaiah continues, "You have multiplied the nation and increased its joy." Joy is not described as shallow entertainment. It is compared to harvest joy and the joy of dividing spoil after victory. That is important. Isaiah is pointing to relief that feels earned relief after endurance. Joy becomes a signal that something heavy has lifted. Then Isaiah names what was lifted. The yoke of burden, the staff on the shoulder, the rod of the oppressor. These are images of domination and exhaustion. The text compares the breaking of that oppression to the day of Midian, a reference to a story where victory came in a way that did not match normal expectations of power. In spiritual language, this means oppression is not ultimate. God can dismantle what looks permanent. In psychological language, it means the human mind is not destined to be trapped forever in fear, conditioning. Even when oppression has shaped habits, a new pattern can begin. A yoke is not only an external force, it is also the inner posture that forms when people believe they cannot change. Isaiah announces a breaking of both, the external pressure and the internal resignation. The passage then speaks of the instruments of war being burned. Boots and garments rolled in blood become fuel for fire. This is not a celebration of violence, it is an image of war being ended and its tools being removed from the future. In modern terms, it is the dream that the energy spent on destruction could be redirected toward building. Now we arrive at the most famous center of Isaiah 9. "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." This is where we must be careful and honest. Theologically, this text has been read in more than one way. In Christian tradition, it is strongly received as messianic and fulfilled in Jesus. In Jewish interpretation, it is often read within Isaiah's historical context, connected to the Davidic line and the hope of righteous kingship, while still carrying a larger horizon of redemption. Either way, the point is not cosmetic. The point is governance, peace, and the restoration of just order. For our metaphysical and psychological lens, we will treat these titles as describing what a fully restored center of leadership looks like. What happens when authority is shaped by wisdom, strength, endurance, and peace, rather than ego, panic, or pride. Wonderful Counselor means guidance that is not driven by impulse or paranoia. It is the kind of counsel that sees beyond the moment, that can hold complexity without collapsing into fear. Psychologically, this resembles mature discernment, the ability to pause, interpret, and choose wisely rather than react. Mighty God in theological language, points to divine power and divine authority. In our reflective lens, it also points to leadership that is not weak, not indecisive, and not easily manipulated. It is strength that serves truth, rather than serving image. The mighty element is not brute force. It is stabilizing power, power that protects the vulnerable and restrains chaos. Everlasting Father points to continuity and faithful care. It is the opposite of leadership that changes with moods, trends, or selfish appetites. It is steadfastness, provision, responsibility, and protection that does not vanish when it is inconvenient. In human terms, it is the return of reliability. Prince of Peace is not simply a calm personality. In Scripture, peace is order, wholeness, and harmony, what the Bible calls shalom. A Prince of Peace is an authority that produces a livable world. Justice without cruelty, strength without oppression, unity without deception. Psychologically, peace means the inner system is no longer at war with itself. Thoughts, values, and actions begin to align. Isaiah then says that the increase of this government and peace will have no end. This is a vision of a reality where righteous order does not collapse after one generation. The text places it on the throne of David with justice and righteousness. And it adds a final engine. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. In other words, this is not merely human optimism, it is God's insistence on redemption. The future is not held together only by human willpower, it is sustained by divine commitment. But Isaiah does not end the chapter with celebration. He turns the light toward a resistant ego. A word is sent against Jacob, it falls on Israel. Pride speaks, "The bricks have fallen, but we will rebuild with hewn stones." This is the voice of denial. Instead of asking why the collapse happened, the ego doubles down on image. It wants the same life, just with more impressive materials. This is psychologically precise. When people are confronted with consequences, there are two paths: humility or pride. Humility asks, what must change in us? Pride says, we will prove we are fine. Pride upgrades the exterior while keeping the interior untouched. Isaiah warns that this refusal to learn invites further instability. The chapter describes adversaries rising, confusion spreading, leaders misleading, and the people becoming spiritually and socially disoriented. It becomes so severe that the language turns into a shocking metaphor. People consuming their own arms, self-destruction, internal collapse, a community turning on itself because it has lost the unity that holds it together. When the center fails, the system cannibalizes itself. Isaiah's repeated refrain is chilling. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. Theologically, this does not have to mean uncontrolled rage. It can mean persistent opposition to injustice, and persistent pressure against pride that refuses correction. The hand stretched out can be read as continued judgment, but also as continued engagement. God has not abandoned the situation. The crisis continues because the refusal continues. So what do we take from episode 14? First, darkness is real, but it is not final. Great light is Isaiah's declaration that despair does not own the future. Second, joy is not random. It emerges when oppression is broken and meaning returns. Third, the titles in verse 6 describe the qualities of redeemed leadership: wise counsel, stabilizing strength, enduring care, and peacemaking order. Fourth, the ego's greatest temptation is pride after collapse, rebuilding the same heart with better stones. Isaiah warns that without inner change, the cycle repeats. And finally, the light does not only illuminate comfort, it also exposes resistance. It calls us to humility, not just inspiration. In the next episode, we move into Isaiah chapter 10, where the arrogance of the oppressor meets the limits of human power. We will explore the image of the axe and the woodcutter, what it means when an instrument forgets who holds it. Join me for episode 15, The Axe and the Woodcutter. If this series helps you see with clearer inner eyes, subscribe to our YouTube channel and keep walking toward the great light.